Yo gamers, Nature here. Today we're going to talk about the Super Bowl. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to go over a quick hunter melee only guide. We'll touch base on talents, runes, rotation, and what pet to use. Now first, I just made a video going over range versus melee hunter and talking about the difference between the two and their current status in WoW Season of Discovery. Now, we went over things like what's BiS, what can we expect going forward, etc. So in order to save y'all time, I'm just going to cover the guide info, and if interested in that, I'll link it in the description below. Now, if you're a hunter player who's really looking at this and saying, should I try it? Is SoD even worth logging in? I got to tell you, I was right there with you, and I think most of the community was saying, wow, if melee hunter is super viable or takes over range, I'm re-rolling a different main. I also know a lot of players that kind of did the opposite, but I'm going to be honest, this is a straight W for Blizzard. This is a blast. In reality, it's just fun. If you haven't tried it and you're reluctant at all, I got to say, give her a go. Now, what I mean by that too, if you haven't even started SoD, there's things to get you caught up. It's a new phase. Everybody's starting basically fresh. So this is a huge W for Blizzard. And at the end of the day, the question is this fun? In my opinion, I got to say yes, and that's my opinion. You could disagree, but I think it's a W. Now, with all that being said, make sure you mash that like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Let's first touch base on the two new runes that make the build viable. On our new waste slot, we're going Melee Specialist. For this, it reduces our cooldown on Raptor Strike to 3 seconds from 6 seconds, and it makes it instant. This means we don't need to wait for our weapon's melee attack to then cast the Raptor Strike, which also adds a good amount of damage here. The CD to Mongoose Bite is removed. This isn't that huge, but it does have its niche cases. In addition, it has a 30% chance to reset the cooldown of your Raptor Strike, which it already buffed as well in the rune, so that way you can use it again if it resets. On our new feat rune, we'll use dual wield specialization. It increases the damage done by your offhand weapon by 50%. This mathematically makes your main hand and offhand do the same amount of base level damage. Now, of course, offhands do have some disadvantages like glancing blows or reduced hit, but this kind of makes up for how hunters are used to two-handers because they quote unquote hit harder. Next, it causes your Raptor Strike to strike with both weapons when you are dual wielding. And Raptor Strike deals 30% increased damage when you are wielding two weapons of the same type. This basically makes your Raptor Strike a viable melee ability, where before it just kind of added a little bit of tickle damage onto our normal two-hander melee auto attack. So this is strictly built with melee only hunter in mind. Let's talk about talents we'll use in PvE. For melee only hunter, we are pretty limited in our options. The majority of talents don't really affect melee. Really, we can go Beast Mastery. This is what the top hunters currently are doing world on parses right now. However, we all know how hunter pets were broken in phase 1. And I'm making this reference because of multipliers. That's the reason that they were broke. So basically things that do like 2 times 2 equals 4, but then 4 times 4 is 16. You see how those multipliers can scale quickly when they're added together or multiplied together. So there's a interesting build that I've tested and haven't really seen anybody do it in raid yet. It absolutely wrecks. And it is insanely fun in PvP. Could this be a new PvE meta? Well, I don't know, but it's got a lot of potential and it's a blast. I full-heartedly believe this is absolutely fun. Now, we'll cover the first path. First, we have the Beast Mastery tree. We'll go 5 out of 5 improved aspect of the hawk, 5 out of 5 improved monkey. This is a change from the normal build. The reason why is because Hawk is ranged attack power only. Now, you'll normally want to have Hawk active because your pet scales off of your ranged attack power. However, if you have mobs hitting you, this can help you fish for Mongoose Bite procs and Mongoose Bite with the new rune that we already touched base on. Now, then we'll go 2 out of 2 improved revive pet, 5 out of 5 unleash fury, 5 out of 5 ferocity, 1 out of 1 intimidation, 2 out of 2 bestial discipline. Then we'll finish off the tree with 5 out of 5 frenzy. Now, I get a lot of questions about frenzy because technically you can have a max uptime on frenzy with 3 out of 5 talents if you have a fast pet like a 1.0 or 1.2 attack speed pet, while 4 out of 5 points works with a 2.0 attack speed pet. So I get nature, why are we saying 5 out of 5 when we can do less? Well, in reality, there's no other beast mastery talents that provide any type of damage. So if we're talking about a BiS spec that's doing the BiS amount of damage, 5 out of 5 simply helps reduce RNG off your opener or just random RNG drops while in combat, especially if the boss is moving, resetting, doing mechanics, etc. With that being said, it is minimal. And for example, in a speedrunning group, you may want to put those 2 extra points in improved cheetah or pack. So you could definitely use it elsewhere, or like a PvPer might want to put the 1 point into bestial swiftness. Lastly, in the build, we'll put the 1 out of 1 into bestial wrath, which is a huge ability on its own. These are really what I'd stick to for PvP and for PvE with the Beast Mastery melee build. But with that being said, here's a quick variant. I'll throw that in here if you have interest. This kind of focuses on maximizing that Raptor Strike ability, which we talked about multipliers earlier, but this adds a 20% crit just randomly in there, getting you increased damage. And it also does more damage for like humanoids, or if you want to put those points in monster slaying, it could be good on those type of encounters. Now, what runes do we normally use in this build? We'll grab Aspect of the Lion to buff our raid and to give us additional stats to increase our pet scaling. Beast Mastery rune to increase our pet damage output and give it a little bit more survivability. And Flanking Strike to provide us with extra big hitting melee ability. And lastly, of course, we'll use Melee Specialist and Dual Wield Specialization that we covered at the beginning. Now, lastly for this build, let's cover the rotation. For melee hunters, we actually don't use a rotation. This implies it's the exact same thing done on the exact same timeline and then repeated. We are using what's called a priority-based system. I just call it a rotation because that's what we're used to. This means we basically have a order of effective abilities and just use what's most effective first. Now, the order is Flanking Strike. This is our best ability, so we'll use that first. If Flanking Strike is then on cooldown, because we've already used it, we'll then use Raptor Strike. If then Flanking and Raptor Strike are on cooldown, we can use either Mongoose, Bite, or Wing Clip. Now, majority of the time, we're going to be using Flanking Strike and Raptor Strike. That's going to be the majority by far of the damage, but we can weave the other 2 in when we can. Now, here's where the build gets a little bit interesting. So we all know that in a ranged build, we can actually do melee weave to min-max and do additional damage. Now, in a melee only build, we can actually ranged weave. Where this gets a little bit tricky or difficult is it's not going to be effective because of the way the auto attacks and Raptor Strikes don't line up. We're not going to basically like Raptor Strike and then weave out to range to do a ranged ability. However, if another mob is in range, we can weave in ranged abilities. So the priority here on the ranged abilities, so if Flanking Strike, Raptor Strike are on cooldown, we can then use multi-shot and we can apply Serpent Sting on mobs as well. So again, we're not moving out to weave those in, but we are able to min-max our damage on fights that have other mobs available, or on trash that has other mobs available to do a little bit extra damage. Now, the next build is why my mind was changed about Melee Hunter and why something like Season of Discovery is so freaking cool sometimes. This is just out of left field and something that we've never done before. Now, before I rock into this, I'm going to have some non-believers when they see the build. So I'm just going to post a clip that I recorded earlier real quick here. Just check this out. you're probably looking at this and saying, what? Well, let's break it down. We have two variants. First, let's cover PvE. We'll go 3 out of 3 improved monster slaying and 3 out of 3 improved humanoid slaying, 2 out of 2 savage strikes, which gives us that 20% increased chance to crit with Raptor Strike. Now, truthfully, for PvE, you can put the next 4 points wherever you want to. I like entrapment. Do some fun for PvP when I'm not playing PvE, but for the PvE, deflection's really good too, and so is improved wing clip. Now, 2 out of 2 into clever traps, 1 out of 1 into deterrence. Now, the next row, if we have enough hit, we can go less on this sure-footed, but let's be real, in the 40 bracket, we'll probably just do the 3 out of 3 into sure-footed, 1 out of 2 into trap mastery, 2 out of 2 into improved feign death so we can trap weave, 3 out of 3 into killer instinct, 1 out of 1 into counterattack, 5 out of 5 into lightning reflexes for the 15% agility boost, and wyvern sting for that extra CC, and a harder hitting sting that can help us on the opener. For PvP, it's very similar. We just drop some of the points if you want to for additional CC and root abilities like entrapment and improved feign death. Now, what runes do we use in this build? We're going to focus on either Lone Wolf, which I touched base on earlier, but this is a multiplier, which stacks on top of other multipliers, which makes this very effective. Lone Wolf is going to be the best rune to use in this scenario. Now, we'll also consider aspect of the Lion. This is a similar story that Lion has been a lot since Season of Discovery started. It's a DPS loss. It's a required raid buff, however, so we may have to use it. As a side note here, I'm going to be honest, Hunters are the only class that is DPS only in the game, meaning we don't have any other main roles we fill, like how rogues or warriors can tank, for example. Now, we can kind of kid ourselves and say pets can tank as well, but that's not a main role. So this, to be honest, should be fixed. Hunters shouldn't be in a position to nerf their damage as a utility to get into a raid, especially when we're one of the higher damage outputs and the only damage only class. So why are we forced to gimp ourselves? It's great to have the buff, but this shouldn't take a rune slot and like nerf our class, for example. So I'm sure we're always going to choose our team over our own performance. So I know if I had to, I'm going to pick Lion, of course, but I don't like that we're stuck in that position. So Blizzard has a W in a lot of ways in this conversation, but this is one L. This is a little bit of feedback, so sorry for the rant. That is now over. Next, we'll grab Carve and Flanking Strike. These are two melee abilities that just add additional damage output for us and give us melee buttons to click, to be honest. As a side note here, Carve is a frontal cone AoE. If you jump when you use this ability, it will make the AoE range a little bit bigger, meaning you could do more damage with this ability in like an AoE pull or an AoE scenario. So lastly, of course, we'll use melee specialists and dual wield specialization. Now for this build, let's cover the rotation. We simply use a priority based system like we touched base before. However, we have more abilities in this build. The order here is Flanking, then Raptor Strike, then Carve, and then we'll put in Immolation Trap here because remember, we can feign death and trap. We can even use this in the previous build as well. Then, if available, we can use Mongoose Bite, Counterattack, Wing Clip, kind of like before. We can just pick one of the three. Whatever is applicable, but to be honest here, we probably won't get to the end of this very often unless if there's really bad RNG. For our range weaving abilities, we're going to do the same thing as before, but we will use Wyvern Sting if applicable, since it does more damage than the Serpent Sting. Now, you have it. Here's the Melee Hunter again. The last thing and the biggest question I get is what pet am I going to use? Well, because we're using Flanking Strike in all of these builds, having a slower attack speed pet is king. The pet that's king right now is cat. So we'll want to pick up the slowest cat, which is a 2.0 attack speed cat. And we'll want to make sure and pick up bite and claw rank 6 to make sure we're doing the most amount of damage with our pet. Side note, also grab dash. That's going to allow your pet to get in and out of combat and get their rotation going as quickly as possible. So that'll make it do a little bit more damage as well. Now, I was 100% the person 2 weeks ago that said, if this happened, I'm playing a different main. But it turns out it's super fun. So appreciate Blizzard for adding this how it is. And really hope we don't see a big nerf train on it here. Because remember, hunters scale the least with gear, you guys. So if hunters are doing really good, that's a great thing. It's the beginning of the phase. They always should because they scale the least with gear. Everybody else is going to catch up. Don't worry about it. And if we want range to do good, just buff the range. So I think we're in a good place here. So mash that like and subscribe. If you're feeling like a croc, join the Croc Nation. Other than that, peace.